Hi, and welcome to the Men Need to Be Heard show. My name is Dan, and today I'm going to do something I don't normally do with the show, which is to do a pre-introduction. And the reason I'm doing that is because the show's topic, which is about paternity fraud, is one I often hear from my viewers that they would like to get more information about. This has been further spurred on by the recent viral video that went around on social media, where an older man had shared the story of how he found out at age 70 that his two sons, who were in their 40s, were not his biological children. As that video went around and as I did my commentary on that video, I had almost 100 men reach out to me seeking more information about paternity fraud because they suspected they might be a victim of it as well. Now, while I have done research on it and even written articles and done videos on it, I am by no means an expert on the topic, and I am not a lawyer, so I wanted to get someone on who is a lawyer and who is an expert on paternity fraud to discuss the topic and try and give some general information to those who are seeking it. And I'm fortunate enough today to have as my guest Randy Kessler, a prominent attorney who's represented many men in paternity fraud cases, including the one I believe started all the awareness on paternity fraud, that of Carnell Smith. Mr. Kessler is the founding partner of the law firm Kessler and Salmiani, a family law practice in Atlanta, Georgia. Randy is the author of many family law books, including Divorce, Protect Yourself, Your Kids, and Your Future. He's also the author of the GA Library of Family Law Forms, as well as How to Mediate a Divorce. In addition, Mr. Kessler has over 40 years of experience in domestic relations and family law matters, including divorce, custody, prenuptial agreements, and of course, paternity cases. And as I said, he was one of the attorneys that worked on the Carnell Smith case, which is often cited as the case that brought paternity fraud to the forefront and which subsequently has led to many states passing legislation that, among other things, allows men to use DNA testing to disprove paternity. To sum it all up, in a nutshell, Randy knows his stuff. Randy was gracious enough to share some of his time and join me to discuss what paternity fraud actually is, how prevalent it may be, the potential ramifications for the parties involved, as well as legal remedies that may be available to men who may suspect that they are victims of paternity fraud. So join us for a great discussion. And one final quick note that I do need to make is that all of the information we discuss is for educational purposes only. It should not be construed as legal advice, as Randy notes during the show. The laws vary in each state and can often be quite complicated. So if you are seeking legal advice, you should contact a qualified attorney in your area to answer any questions you may have. All right, now that the CYA and legal mumbo jumbo is done, let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It is Dan, and I've got another exciting show for you, and this is one that I've had a lot of requests for. So one of the biggest topics that I hear about from my followers that want me to cover and talk about is paternity fraud. And a lot of them think it's a huge problem. A lot of them think it's a minor problem. And I think it's somewhere in between. But I am not an expert on it. They often ask me questions. So I went looking and I found this gentleman right here that I'm going to have on today, who I think is the expert. He may not agree with me on that because he's a very humble man. But his name is Randy Kessler. He is an attorney. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. And look, there are a lot of experts. I've had my encounters with it and we'll get into it, but thanks for having me. It's an important topic. It's still under publicized area of the law until you're really in it. That's when you've got to find out about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is a lot of the guys that reach out to me about it never knew anything about it until it affected them. They'll suddenly find out, oh, wait, my child that I thought was my child is not actually mine. And what can I do about it? I'm not a lawyer. I have done a little research on it and written about it a little bit.
It's funny, Dan. I was just interviewed on, I think, some Scripps news station, News Nation or whatever. And there's a law in 4 states. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, it's fine.
There's a law in 4 states that is still on the books that says you cannot get a divorce if a woman is pregnant. I think it's Missouri, Texas, Arkansas, and Arizona. And my whole discussion was, what happens if somebody else gets her pregnant? You're going to force the child to be born to a husband who's not the father. just simple things that, in real life, these are real life problems that the legislature, in its wisdom, is thinking will make people stay together so the child is born in an intact marriage and not a bastard. And what they're really doing is then they're promoting, paternity fraud or false paternity or false legitimation. It's everywhere. You're right.
I wasn't aware of that. So there's actually 4 states where if you want to get divorced, you can't. That's gonna
Until the child is
until the
born,
child's born.
even
Now
if even if it's not your child.
that's amazing. So, Randy, let's take a step back because I think one of the common things that people struggle with is understanding what is paternity fraud exactly. Because there's a lot of misconceptions that I've heard, and I've figured, again, you're the expert on it. From a legal standpoint, from a general standpoint, how would you define paternity fraud?
All right. So every topic that we discuss, every legal topic, you want to have a catchphrase so people sort of get it. And I think that's what paternity fraud has become. There's no dictionary definition. And sometimes it's not paternity fraud. It might be paternity mistake. It might be an innocent mistake. It might be a naive thing. But generally, what it means is that somebody believes they're the father, and it turns out they were deceived because, and unfortunately, and it sounds sexist, the only people that can really commit paternity fraud or really do this generally are women, right? There could be some extreme circumstances with alternative reproductive technology and that kind of stuff. Somebody fakes an embryo and swaps something out. But generally speaking, it means that a woman doesn't tell her partner, whether they're married or not, that the child they're having might not be his. No one knows for sure, right? If they both had sex within the 6-week window, and so doesn't take a test. And there are a lot of reasons that women do this. And I'll tell you something that's really interesting. When I was doing some research years ago, before there was swab testing and it was blood DNA testing, American blood banks, the ABA, American Association of Blood Banks, reported that 25% of all um, married people that test for paternity, turns out that it's not their child,
Mm,
which sounds like a big number. But again, that's because those are people that have some reason to question it. And if you think about it, people that are married are probably less likely to say to their husband, I'm glad we're having a child, but there's something I got to tell you. It's easier to say it to somebody you're not married to. So this actually happens more in marriages than in relationships or situationships. But generally speaking, paternity fraud is when somebody deceives the other one about their being the father or not. And it goes both ways. Sometimes we've had cases where someone put someone on the hook that's not, and we've had someone lie and say they swapped out the test because they wanted to get custody of the child. So they said, well, you're not really the father. They swapped the saliva, long story. And I can give you the story if we have time. They wanted to make sure that the judge knew that he was not the father so that he couldn't get any parenting time. So some people do it meanly. And I would think most people, and maybe I'm naive, most people are innocent that they think it's their husband's. They had a one night stand, but it couldn't have been that person because it was only one night stand, or he said he had a vasectomy, and they don't find out until years later that they were deceived too. And it's a hard discussion. You don't say, by the way, now that we're having a child, I want to clear this up. So it's just it's something else. I know I'm talking a lot already, but
no,
there
go
was a
ahead.
bill, there was a bill introduced years ago, I think in Pennsylvania, a paternity affidavit, which I think is actually a really good idea, but you can't get it through any legislature. What if we made every woman, once they're going to a hospital to deliver a baby, sign an affidavit that there's no possibility the child is anyone else's, right? And now, it sounds uncomfortable. You're going to create friction, all right? When someone's going to give birth, they might have to reveal some secret. So I could see why it could not be passed or not be approved unanimously. But that would clear the air. Why not do it right at the start instead of someone finding out years later? Um, or if the woman signs it and she's lying, then there's some consequences down the road. The problem is, you get deeper into it situation by situation. Maybe it's not good because the person is somebody that if the other person found out, they would go kill them, or they would be,
Right.
you can all sorts of extremes, but generally speaking, generally, I think that would be a good rule. Make people declare, and if you want the man to feel equally treated, you can say the man has to swear that he hasn't had sex with anybody besides his wife in the last 9 months, even though it doesn't matter to the pregnancy. maybe that's if she's got to come clean, then he's got to come clean.
Well, you're going into an area that I've long advocated for, which is mandatory DNA testing at birth, right? I
Right.
actually lobbied for that back in the day in New York, and the pushback from the legislators that I was talking to primarily was, well, you don't want to put the woman in an uncomfortable position, kind of like what you're
Right.
relating to with the affidavit. Um, the other argument they'll make.
The affidavit you think would be an easier sell. Yours is proof positive. The affidavit is sort of we trust her, but if she's lying later, at least we can say, shame on you. Your idea is probably cleaner and better if you really want to get to the truth of what's happening.
Mm. Well, it's what is it, Reagan that said trust but verify back in the
Right.
day.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's again the other argument they'll often make, and this is a question I wanted to ask you is, they'll say, well, it's not that big a deal. It's very rare. It doesn't happen all that much. And, if you go looking for statistics, they are all over the place. You kind of pointed out earlier, people will say it's as high as 25, 30. I've even seen as high as 50%, but those are the cases where they legitimately suspect that
Right.
the child's not there. When you take
And
that out of it and just look at the overall,
or on
where,
top of that, even the ones that legitimately suspect don't want to know, right? I can
right.
tell you, I'll tell you a cute story. I represented a basketball player who'd had a child for 7 years, but never had a test. And I said, let's get a test. And he said, no, that's my child. And I said, how do you know? He said, well, the kid's got my jump shot. And and I laughed. I said, I knew the guy, and he's a good ball player in the NBA. I said, yeah, well, poor kid, because you don't have a good jump shot. But the truth is, it wasn't that. It was he'd already treated this child as his, and it doesn't matter at that point. At some point, for a lot of people, biology or not, this is my child. So you're right. The numbers are probably much bigger because a lot of people don't want to even bother asking the question. Maybe my mother cheated on my father.
Mm-hmm.
Children don't want to know. So,
And that's, to me, I would love to find some solid numbers on it, but I don't think there's any that exist right now. I mean, the last couple of studies I saw, one was a couple of years ago and one last year, put it somewhere around 10, 11, 12%. Again, I think that's a tad high personally. I'd probably guess, and it's a guess, 5 to 10% maybe. But it's enough of a problem. This is where I wanted to kind of go with it, that it still needs to be addressed, right? Whether it's 1%, 5%, 10%, and this was the argument I would have with the legislators, is to say that, let's say it's 5%, you're still putting 5% of dads on the hook for a child potentially with child support, or the child is being 5% of children are believing that their dad is their dad when it's someone else. And, again, I get the pushback.
I
Well,
agree. It's all, magic in the legislature. And maybe people are thinking
yeah,
better for a child to grow up with their mother's husband as their father than to find out the real father who may be a deadbeat. And maybe that is better for a child, but then are we playing God? Are we deciding who the father is? That's, the issue. Um, it might be, I'm sure there are mathematicians and scientists and psychologists that could get together and decide, yeah, it's probably better for a more stable society if people that are married, the children born to them are their children, whether biologically or not. Maybe there's some studies that find that. It doesn't sound or smell or feel right to me, but I'm not that smart.
yeah,
Maybe there's a theory that makes sense to.
it's a tough topic, right? Because there's four individuals involved with these type of cases. There's obviously the mother, there's obviously the presumed father, but then there's also the child, and then ultimately the biological father. That's why I often, when I talk to people about this, I say, if it's a true case of paternity fraud, there's three victims. Everybody forgets about the biological father for the most part, but to me, ultimately, the true victim is the child, right?
Funny,
Because
you know what? I love the way you said that. So I wrote an article for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution 30 years ago called "The Secondary Victim," and it was all about we protect children. Right? Children should have an intact family, but there's this other person out there who's not really the father, but he's paying child support and he can't afford to have another family because he's paying child support for a child that's not his. But you're exactly right. There are levels of victimhood. And, fortunately or unfortunately, as a society, we do always protect children first, or we should. So that you're right. Sometimes,
But again, it brings the argument: is are we protecting the children ultimately to hurt them in the long run? Right? I don't know if you saw, there was a recent video that went viral on TikTok, and it was a 70-ish-year-old judge who found out that his two sons, who were 40 and whatever, around 40, were not his biological children. The only reason he found out was I think it was his brother needed a new kidney and they were doing the blood tests. So, this poor man at 70 years old now knows that he's not the father of those children. But more importantly, and nobody talked about this because everybody was all over that video, but I was saying, what about the two boys, right? They're now 40 years old and they don't know who their dad is, potentially. We
I've got
don't.
stories like that. People that, I mean, I can't tell you the names because they're
Well,
way too
obviously, yeah.
sensitive, but that everyone knows in their community that they were the children of famous people, but the famous people don't want to know, and the children are suffering because if that person was my dad, my life would be different. I'd like to at least be able to acknowledge it, you know. But it goes both ways, right? Sometimes the real dad might be a horrible person, but that goes to, but whose right is it to decide that? Is it our right as a society, or is it the child's right to know who their father is, good or bad? That's the ultimate dilemma.
I mean, that's a great point you made, right? Is a man could be a horrible father, but he's not the actual father, and these children could have had a much better life with their bio dad. You just don't know, which is why I think it's such an important issue. And those were the type of things I would talk about with legislators ago. They're looking at it from a dollar perspective, to be honest with you, for the most part, right? But there's a lot of other issues that are involved with this, which leads me to where I want to go next, which is, generally speaking, when you're seeing these type of scenarios and you're going through court cases and all that, what if you can kind of just give a quick, what is the mindset of the clients that you're representing? Is because this is a lot of it, I think people assume it's anger, but I'm going to venture a guess it's more hurt than anything. But I'm just curious what you find.
So the first thing that is unfortunately very typical, stereotypical, is that as soon as a father raises that and says, I want to question paternity, almost every time the mother cuts off visitation. So you don't think this is your child? Well, then I'm not going to let you see this child if you don't think it's your child, which is the exact opposite of what they should do. Because maybe he's not the father, but still wants to have a relationship. And he just wants to know. That's happened over and over and over. It's the hurt, it's the frustration. And who it really affects, you talk about 3 people involved, 4 people involved. Here's the person that it often affects even worse, is the new spouse, the new wife. And I'll tell you, we've had clients where they've been paying child support and they get married to somebody, and that family puts off or postpones having a child for financial reasons because the guy's paying child support to this ex. And this family has put off having a child for 10 years and finds
Mm.
out they could have had a child 10 years ago because they shouldn't have been paying child support. And that new wife, or this new world, that maybe that new husband of the husband, whatever it is pretty upset, rightfully so.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. That's something I hadn't even considered at any point. But that's a very
And they're
legitimate.
and they're more adamant. I mean, usually the guys that come around and they learn to live with it, and it's just life is unfair, and we struggle, we get through it, and there'll come a day when child support's over. But the new spouse is really PO'd because they're ethical and they wouldn't have done this to this guy that they love, and somebody else did this is getting away with it, and the money that should go to their family is going to somebody else's family that's not even his. It's really it's tough.
So there's now 4 victims instead of 3, which again, it speaks to just how
And
big.
if they have a child, that's a 6th victim because that child should
Fair
have a
point.
better life and more financial support.
Fair point. So as we're talking about the different players, if you will, I want to kind of get a legal perspective on what are the different rights that each party within the case might have. So by that I mean the mother, the presumed father, in other words, the one that's been assigned paternity, the child, and then the biological father. If you can kind of touch on each of them, and what individual rights they have, just
All right.
on an overall level.
First of all, a disclaimer, right? I'm practicing law in Georgia. That's the only state I'm licensed in. This is not legal advice. Um, and the answer is it's all over the place. So I got to sort of go back in time and tell you a little story.
Okay.
There was a guy named Carnell Smith who came to me and said that he, thought it might not be his child. He took it, there's this new billboard he saw where you can take DNA tests instead of blood tests. And we did it and found out that, he was not the father. We didn't need mother's permission. He took the saliva from him and the child. And we went to court to try to undo it under current existing law at the time in Georgia, which says you have to prove there was extraordinary fraud by the other party. So we said, Judge, she defrauded him. She told him it was his child. The judge asked me, and you're going to like this story, Dan. So the judge asked me, well, didn't his first lawyer tell him he should take a blood test to make sure it's his child? And I said, objection, I'm not going to answer that because that's attorney-client privilege. My client raised his hand and said, Judge, I'll tell you, I didn't take a test because I trusted her. She said it was my child. And so the judge said, case over. You had a right to test it back then. We took it up to the Georgia Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, saying that he had no basis to be sued because he was a legal stranger. It's like me suing you.
Hmm.
I had no basis to sue you. She had no basis to sue him because she didn't have a relationship with him, didn't have a child with him. And the United States Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to take it. So he wanted to be a Gold Star client. So he decided the next step was to go around the country and get laws passed. And he got laws passed in maybe half the states. I haven't kept account lately. He founded a center called the Citizens Against Paternity Fraud, CAPF. We were on Good Morning America, all sorts of shows. And he created laws. So my answer to your question, what is the law? It depends on the state you're in. If you're in a state that
Hmm.
doesn't have any new law for this, you probably have to go back and convince the judge that the woman defrauded you so much that the whole judgment of child support should be thrown out. Okay. If you have one of these new laws, it's some variation of when you find out, you can't say, okay, now that I know that I'm not the dad, I'm going to wait a couple of years and still treat the child as my dad. So you have to act quickly. In Georgia, it's within 90 days. Some states it's faster. You also have to have not known that this was not your child. You couldn't have found out and then just said, well, now that I confirmed, you have to be pretty innocent. Um, and then there are a couple of variations. If the court finds that they defrauded you, the court has to let you off the hook under Georgia law. If the court is not sure, but still found out that it's not your child, the court has the discretion to undo it or not. So the answer really is go see a lawyer in your state. Family law is very state specific. We let the states decide a lot of things. You saw the recent Supreme Court case overturning Roe v. Wade was the same theory that
Hmm.
states should decide family matters, regardless of how you feel about Roe v. Wade. Family law issues, divorce laws, prenuptial laws, those kind of things are determined by each state. And the states are pretty similar. If one state does something extreme, the U.S. Supreme Court could say, we're not going to allow that. But generally speaking, go to a lawyer. There are rights, there are laws in many states. You have to do it in the state you're in. If you're in different states, you might be able to do it in either state, or where the child lives is usually where it's got to be. But it's worth talking to a lawyer. And if a lawyer doesn't know what you're talking about when you say paternity fraud, find another lawyer. I mean, this is something that we've all heard of if we've been around a bit. I mean, you should have a working knowledge of it. It's under the umbrella of family law.
Yeah, you brought up so many interesting points there. If I could just kind of revisit a couple of them. And first of all, let me reiterate what you said. We're not giving legal advice, or you're not, because you're only in Georgia. And as you said, every state is different. When I was doing research on it, you aren't kidding. It is all over the place. I live in North Carolina now. I was researching the law here recently. I was originally from New York. They're totally different in the way they have the laws written, and what I'm finding, because I start reading case law on it, the way it's applied, even.
And it
But
depends on the judge. You could have a judge that grew up conservative or liberal and thinks, the same law, they're going to interpret it a different way. So yeah,
yeah,
depends on the.
it's amazing because it makes it so difficult for people to really grasp and get an understanding of it. And to the best of my knowledge, and there's no overreaching or overarching federal law in any way on this, is there?
Yeah,
So
not that I've seen.
it really speaks to your point, which is if you suspect it, you need to speak to a lawyer in your state, because what happens in Georgia versus North Carolina versus New York versus California could be completely different. And but having said all that, do you find there's any like commonalities at all that you generally see? Like, for example, the presumption that if a couple is married and has a child, the father is the
That's
husband.
everywhere. I think that's everywhere. If you have a child in a marriage, look, there was a situation in California. You may remember Kim Kardashian was married to Chris Humphries,
Mm-hmm.
but she got pregnant by Kanye West before the divorce was finished. Had that divorce not been signed before the child was born, legally that would have been Chris Humphrey's child instead of Kanye West. So in every state, I think, and I'm not 100%, but in every state, I think a child born during the marriage is presumed to be a child of the father and a child of the mother, or a child of the husband and a child of the wife. Um, and then you can always try to go back to court and change it and undo it. But that's something that's uniform. We also now have evolved to the point where married people in almost in every state that I know of have joint custody. If I'm married to my wife, we both have the right to call the hospital and admit our child. We both have the right to call the school and say what's going on with my child because we're married.
Mhm.
If we're not married, most states it's mama's baby, daddy's maybe. Mom's got the rights because we know where the child came from. Dad has to either marry her or file a legitimation case or somehow formalize the relationship. Some states you can do that just by signing the birth certificate. That changes a little bit. And with artificial reproductive technology, that the reasoning for that goes out the window. It used to be we knew who the mother was because that's where the child came from.
Right.
Nowadays, a child could come from a test tube, be implanted in a surrogate. We're not sure if it was which mother donated the egg and which father donated the sperm. So those laws are evolving too. But the presumptions pretty much have been if you're not married, mom has the rights. And if you are married, the new world is both parents have equal rights until a judge tells you otherwise.
So knowing that, this is now we're getting to the crux of what I hear from guys primarily. Although to your point earlier, I hear it from stepmoms also. If you
Sure.
suspect that your wife has had an affair and is having a child and it's not your child, or you have the scenarios like you talk about where they've separated but they're still married, which begs the question: if you're legally separated, does that matter? I guess it depends on the state.
Now we're going off a whole bunch of.
Oh
So,
boy, it's so many.
what's illegal? So, see, you're in North Carolina where
Yeah,
you can't get divorced until you've been separated for a
for
year.
a full year. Yep.
But really, what is a separation? Separation just means we're not sleeping together, we're not in the same bed. So, technically, the easy assumption is you're married until you're divorced. Again, it depends on your state. Talk to a
Right.
lawyer, jurisdiction, but generally speaking, until you're divorced, you're married, and you're gonna be treated like you're married as far as children being born.
And that's why I often say to guys, if you separate from your wife and you don't want to get divorced, you're just going to let it sit. It may come back to haunt you.
Oh, in a lot of ways. Look, we represent a lot of athletes, and the worst thing that we hear from athletes is, "Well, Mr. Kessler, I got out of the league, 5 years ago, and I was up paying her 6,000 a month, but she knew I was out of the league, so she didn't hit me up for it. She was happy with me giving her $1,000 a month, and I did that for the last 5 years, and now she's got a lawyer that says I owe her $400,000. Yeah, because you didn't go back to court and get it reduced in accordance with your new level of income. It's an honest, innocent mistake. People trust each other. They don't want to go pay money for lawyers when they say, well, she's not going to make me pay 6,000 a month when she knows I'm not in the league. And it's an innocent undertaking. But yeah, and I know I sound like I'm promoting lawyers, and I do think everyone should talk to a lawyer if you got a legal problem. But even if you have to find someone, get a lawyer that'll do a free consultation, get some advice, or do like Dan does, research on your own. But knowledge is power. Don't just put your head in the sand and think, the judge will figure out what's fair 5 years from now. Self-protect.
My followers know that I in my past, in my family court cases, I had multiple ones. I generally went pro se, but I always advocate in situations like this, you absolutely need a lawyer. There is no way and I'm fairly knowledgeable as a
Yeah, you
layman,
seem very damn knowledgeable, and I wouldn't want to go up against you as a pro se.
but there is no way I would represent myself on something like this because
Right.
it is
Risk.
so complicated, and uh, I think about scenarios where you may allow evidence in just because you don't know to object or something like that. So any guys that are listening to this, get a lawyer. I'm going to back you up on that.
Yeah, even if it's just to meet with a lawyer.
Yeah,
And look, you can be honest. I can't afford a lawyer. I don't really want to pay you to go to court with me, but can you tell me what to look out for? What booby traps there are? You know, whatever you can afford, or I'll tell you where to look and what books to read and what laws. It's always better if you can afford a lawyer, but not everyone can.
true.
But knowledge is power. Learn and educate yourself like you've done, apparently. Really.
So let's just take that scenario where you as a dad, we're going to take the dad's position here because that's what most of my followers would be. You suspect that a child is not yours. Let's presume for now you're married still. There's been questions that I've been asked, which is, can I go get a DNA test on my own? Can I go to, say, was it 123 and Me or one of them and am I okay in doing that? Because a lot of guys are like, well, I want to do that, but I don't know if I can do that. Is it against the law or something? So let's address that first of all. You're
So
smiling.
again, I'm going to preface every answer with talk to a lawyer in your jurisdiction
Right,
because
right.
I don't want to tell anybody to do anything illegal. In some states, you need both sides' permission as a matter of what's legal. But as a matter of what's scientific, what I understand, and you know this, when you send a DNA swab out, if you send a swab of your saliva and a sample of the child's saliva, they can't tell you 100% you are the father, but they can 100% exclude you from being the father. So if you do that, you go to CVS, you get a kit, you get your saliva, the child's saliva, you send it off. They will send you a response back saying, there is no mathematical way that you could be the father of this child. You share no genes, no DNA in common. That's the scientific answer. The legal question, though, is are you allowed to do that? And are you allowed to tape record somebody without their permission? It depends on the state, but people do it. So I'm not advocating or
Right.
suggesting people do anything that's illegal, but the practical ways, you can do it. You might need mom's permission, and of course that won't hold up in court because mom will say, how do I know you took your child's saliva? Maybe you took your saliva and Don's saliva. And of course it didn't match. So that it came back that you weren't the father of Don.
And that gets to the next question I was going to ask you, which is any of that going to be upheld in court? Or at that point, let's say you did do it, it was legal to do it in your state, you filed your petition in court. I'm going to guess, I don't know this, and again, we understand it's state dependent, but in general, I got to believe the judge is going to go, nope, that's not going to count. We're going to order our own. Would that be the
Right.
case?
Right. But you're going to feel much more confident asking the judge to do a test, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't even, and maybe you don't even suggest it. Maybe you have it and you say, I don't even want to rely on that because I don't want her to trust me. I'm happy to pay another $500 for another test. Um, and hopefully the test you did was correct, and you don't look foolish, but you feel a lot more confident going, you get a phone call in the middle of the night from a friend who says, hey, 8 years ago, you didn't know this, but your wife was sleeping with somebody else and that's not your child. That's a reason to go get a DNA test from the court. But a better reason is to do the test, find out that's not your child. And then you feel more confident saying, I want a test now because I'm pretty confident that it's not my child. So, if you're allowed to do it legally, do it. Maybe you talk to her about it and she says, you know what, you're right. We have to go to some therapy and figure out, and let me tell you why. That would be the best of all worlds. Do you still want to be a father? Yes, I have a relationship with this child. I don't want to keep paying the same child support, but I care for the child. Maybe I'll still provide for private school or pay the health insurance, or there's so many options, and every case is different. Some people they hate the fact that they're paying child support and they don't visit with the child. Some people think, not only am I going to pay child support, I want to do everything I can to make sure that child thrives. And the biology of it may not matter to that person.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on your situation. Usually, I'm sure people that are following you are aggrieved, and people that are upset about it and researching this. The people that aren't upset about it say, yeah, it happened, but you know what? I still got a child out of it, and I'm still happy with that. And for those guys that are listening and watching that can't see how that could happen, I've seen it all. You've seen it all. There
Right.
are, unfortunately, the person that you had a child with or that you were deceived by wasn't a good person and took advantage and is taking your money. But there are people that, you know, are less deceitful and we're young or we're 17 and we're married and didn't, God knows what they thought, the way they were raised religiously and their parents are in the church. And if they tell anybody that they went outside the marriage, that would be worse than telling somebody that they weren't the father. So they chose to lie about the paternity rather than lie about their fidelity. Just there's a lot there.
It's so much to unpack, isn't it? And that's why I always say to people, because if I make a video talking about this topic, they come out of the woodwork at me, and I'll get both sides, right? But there's also a third side that I often hear, which is the guys that are like, I think that might be my child, and I want to be dad, but
That's
I
the hard one.
have no legal recourse because they're not a parent of the child. They can file a petition in court again, depending on what state they're in. But a lot of times they're telling me, and I don't know if this is true or not, that the judge is basically saying, "Get out." You
Let me
know.
let me throw you for a loop.
Okay.
Okay. So my job is to figure out how would a judge look at this situation. Every time I go to court, I don't think, why am I right? Why is my client right? I think, what is the judge interested in? What will the judge want to hear to convince the judge to do what I want?
Hmm.
And if you're a judge and you see household, white picket fence, family getting along, family of, 4 kids, and then you have a guy who comes in and says, one of those children doesn't belong, that child belongs to me. I want to bring that child to live with me, and I live in the wilderness in Alaska. and this child lives in your community, judge, in your nice little community in Oklahoma that you like and you love and goes to the same school your children go to. I want you to take that child out of that community, let them come live with me in Alaska. It's probably the right thing to do, right? You should
Hmm.
have a child be with their natural father, but the child's grown up with three siblings and with who they think is their mother and their father. I mean, it might be hard on a judge to do the legally correct thing. I mean, it just, that's what makes the legal system interesting to me, that it's not a black and white thing. It's, it depends on your judge, depends on the law. So as much as people don't want to hear that, I can promise you there are judges that think, I don't care what the law is, I'm going to do what I think is best for this child. And I think it's best for this child to be with this mother and non-father than to be with this real father. And that's not right. And that's probably, you don't like it, but it's human nature.
Well, I mean, one of the things I catch a lot of flack because while I'm no fan of family court judges, don't get me wrong, but I would not want to be in that position. I don't envy them in any way. They have an
I'll tell
impossible
you,
job.
I'll tell you, I've talked to hundreds of judges and I've chaired a lot of seminars. And every time the question comes up about how do they feel about custody cases, almost every single one will say, I would rather try a death penalty case because the person that committed the murder deserves death or life in prison or whatever it is. I'd rather try a murder trial than a custody case where I'm deciding what's best for that child because I just don't know. So judges, at least good judges, decent judges, ethical judges, hate being put in a position of having to decide between two parents
Hmm.
where the child should live and who should make decisions. You're right. They don't want to be in that position. It doesn't give them an out for making bad decisions. If they're going to take the job and they're going to do the job, they better do it right. But it's still not an easy job, and they don't always get it right. And sometimes there is no right answer. Sometimes it's a close call. And what do you do? And do you regret it, when you find out that something went wrong, or do you take ownership if something went right? It's a tough one. You're exactly right. I wouldn't want to be a judge doing that.
Like I said, I can't fathom it, and they're gonna make mistakes. They're human beings, but again, in general, I think most of them do the best they can, but they're looking at, you put a motion in, your opposing attorney puts a motion in, they're going to read those two motions. They may, depending on the case, get a few hours or days or minutes to make a decision that's going to affect the child's life. And unfortunately, sometimes they're going to make mistakes, other times they're going to get it right.
And you
But
know what? And it's not that, what I would say, well, it might be partially the judge's fault. It's the parent's fault. And I know,
thank you for saying that.
but there's always one parent that's better than the other, right? There's always one parent who's putting the child's needs further along than the other parent. But that doesn't matter. It's still, you guys had a child together. Why is my child looking? This reverse. Sorry. All right. I'm going to straighten up while I'm on your.
You're
Okay.
fine. You go for it. We're a casual podcast, so you're good.
All right. So we're doing the other side now. Look at this mirror image. It's always getting me.
Yeah,
All right.
whatever way you go is going to be the wrong
Thank
way.
you.
I do the same thing when I'm fixing my shirt.
Oh, look at it. Well, I do so much. All right.
See, you just humanized yourself, Randy.
See that? I'm real. I'm not just, I'm not an avatar. But you're exactly right. It's the parent's fault. And the problem is it's too easy for judges to say, you two had a child. You two should have figured this out. Because you didn't, I get to make the decision. And I might make a bad decision, but that's your fault because you gave it to me. That's the wrong attitude. But what most judges, most good judges will do is give a lecture. And they'll say something like, sir, what if a policeman knocked on your door tomorrow and said, you're going to start seeing your child Fridays at 5 until Saturdays at 6 every other weekend, and you get Wednesday night dinners? You'd freak out, right? Well, that's what's about to happen unless you guys go work it out. Or, ma'am, that might be what happens to you. They'll
Hmm.
try to scare them into settling and say, take a few more minutes because you all know your schedules, your situation better than I do. Both of you are going to be unhappy with what I do. Um, and it's always, people, they're never really happy when it's resolved. But if a judge imposes something, maybe it's easier for them to say, well, that judge got it wrong. At least I didn't give up on my child. I'll tell you something else if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
You know what? This is all right. I'm gonna fix this. On your so when you're doing the video settings, it's mirror. I don't want to mirror my video. Now I'm better off.
There
All
you
right.
go. Now you can see
Now I
yourself.
can see. Now I can see how to move it. All right.
We're,
So if where was I?
you're talking about where the judges are trying to make a decision and the difficulty of it.
Yeah. So, judges can say it's a difficult decision, but they're going to make a quick decision and it's not going to ever be right. Uh, they want parents to figure it out. Parents know what's best for their children. And, judges can feel better because they didn't really have a choice. But I think a good judge, I know what I was going to say is parents often say, uh, why did I settle for this? Why did I settle for that? And they don't realize how bad it would be. I've been to court a lot,
Mhm.
and I see cases where the answer is so clear to me what should happen. And the judge does the exact opposite, and it's a judge that I respect. And that makes me think the next time I better do everything I can to settle. And what I would suggest for some of your folks out there that are thinking about going to court to try to vindicate themselves and get their rights and prove how bad the other one is, go to a court or stream on YouTube some of the courts that are open. Watch a couple of hearings that have similar situations. At the end of the case, I can almost guarantee you will think you know exactly what should happen. And then the judge will open his or her mouth and tell you what's going to happen. And you think, how could the judge do that? Did we not hear the same thing? It's because we all have our own biases. The judge grew up, with no sisters, and so it's not as important to be with your siblings or the judge. Watch another case, and you'll realize taking matters into your own hand, even if you don't get everything you want, is almost always better than the result the judge will do. Very rarely is it a clean sweep where you get everything you want in court.
I'm laughing, Randy, because I want to say I did not pay him to say that because it's the first thing I tell everyone. So guys will come to me and say, I'm going through a divorce. I don't know, how do I find a lawyer? How to do all blah blah blah. And the first thing I say to them is, you have to go observe family court. They're open courts generally, unless there's an adoption or something like that. Go observe. Just sit in the gallery for an entire day and watch because it's going to blow your mind. You have no idea what you're
Yeah.
heading into.
In Georgia, we have jury trials in divorce, only Georgia and Texas. And you can imagine after jury trial, they deliberate and the jurors come up with a decision. And it's like they all saw a different movie. They all 12
Oh
watched
my
the same
God.
movie and they all talk about different things. I teach a class at Emory Law School on how to try a divorce jury trial. And the final exam is a trial in the courthouse. The students try the case and then they get to listen to the jurors deliberate. And it's incredible what one juror will say, well, she doesn't need alimony because she, went to college. And another juror will say, yeah, but she's in recovery from alcoholism. She needs some time to get back on her feet, and then they start saying, well, listen, I had a sister who was in the same situation and I wish she had more help and more alimony. And the other one says, well, I had a sister-in-law who sucked my money out of my brother's wallet every day and she shouldn't get alimony. So you never know how a human being, a judge, is going to decide. So if
I
you can
can't even
control your destiny,
fathom putting this in front of a jury. As bad
you
as
can
it is
imagine.
to put it on a judge. No offense to you in Georgia, please don't take any, but that's
Now,
crazy.
well, I'm going to defend Georgia.
Okay, go for it.
Sometimes you have judges, right? There's some judges that you don't like. The judge may be, you know, pro man, pro woman, pro this, pro that. It gives you an out. It also makes people, and we are in the Bible Belt, think, do I really want to go in front of 12 strangers? Maybe some of them are in my church and explain everything about my life to them. I think I'd rather settle the case. So it actually has the reverse effect of making people settle cases. But, I'll tell you something though. Judges hear it all the time and they get one case, next case. When you're in front of a jury, they take it seriously. They try to listen because it's the only one they're going to handle. They're only going to handle one case. And
Fair
so they
point.
spend some significant time in thinking about it. The problem is, like you said, you never know what you're going to get, to quote Forrest Gump.
Yeah, you could get 12 different totally different opinions and hopefully they can come to a consensus, but if you've got one that's been through a bad divorce and another one's been through an easy one. And
or
I
they're all poorer than your client and they think your client wants too much money, or they're all richer than your client and wants to make him pay or her pay. You never know what you're going to get.
You don't, and that's both a good and bad thing, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So
Settle. It makes you settle.
yeah, which is the key, I think, for a lot of in divorce in general. But when it comes to like paternity fraud in particular, do you find settlement is I as a layman sitting here, I would think
I
that's
love
not
what
an
I do.
option. Yeah,
No, I love what I do because it's not black and white. It's not math.
yeah.
It's an art and a science. And part of it is when the man finds out he's not the father and he confronts the woman, it takes time. She's going to be defensive. She's got an explanation. She knew this day was coming. She's got to wrestle with it. And it's just like a divorce or like the end of any relationship. You have to figure out, okay, how am I going to deal with this emotionally, rationally, financially? How am I going to tell my new husband? How am I going to tell my other kids? Once that time period passes, once you get all those things figured out, then it should be a business transaction. We figure out what's best. But the problem is, how dare you accuse me of
Mhm.
cheating on you? Even if it's true, this is still your child. You went to that child's first and second and third and fourth birthday. You took that child on a trip to Disney World, and now you don't want to be the father. And I've heard that. And I'm like, am I hearing this right? You deceived him, and now you're blaming him. But that's human nature, is to defend your own actions. and think that you're not a bad person. You did what you had to do back then to protect your family. So it's just, it's hard until you can get some space in between the confrontation and the resolution. You can't resolve anything where everybody's mad and emotions are high. And, at some point in time, it's not, you cheated on me, so you should pay the price. It's, we have a child that the man has a relationship with that he should not be paying support for, but he wants to keep a relationship, but he doesn't want to do it at the expense of his real child. I mean, how do you put all these factors in and come up with a solution? It's hard. This stuff is hard.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of an interview I did easily 20 years ago with a woman who had deceived her husband about it. And we got into the discussion of why did she do it? And she's like, I was trying to hide my affair. Well, that was her primary motivation. And, you know, many years later, it got found out. And she said, had I been upfront with my husband from day one, it would have been a lot less worse, better off for her to have done that than what she was dealing with when she got caught because, there was a massive court case. Her child
Sure.
disowned her. I mean, the child will not. This is 20 years ago, but at the time she was saying, "My child will not speak to me," and has said they will never speak to me again. So,
Sad. That's really sad.
it is sad, isn't it? Because people
I'm
forget
sure she
about
loved the
that.
child. I'm sure she thought she was doing the right thing by her child. So, you know,
It's that's why I always say to people, honesty is the best policy with this stuff because you may think you're going to get away with it, but as that viral video that went out a couple of weeks ago, 40 years later, it got caught, and now that whole family is got to deal with it. And
it's sort of like every murder mystery you see. Ooh, there's a corpse. Let's go to the police. No, if we go to the police, they're going to think we did it. Let's try to solve this mystery ourselves. And then, a year later, everyone says, "Why didn't you call the police?" Yeah.
yeah, and as you said, there's no right or wrong. It's what do you think's best. But in general, if you stay honest and you approach it with that philosophy, I think anyway, that is the best approach.
It should
Um,
be. Then you'll never know if the other approach had worked. You'd be like, "Why did I tell him? Now he's mad at me. He's never going to let that out." So you can't win. I mean, but I
there
get
is no win, right? So what's the best loss? I guess is the way I would put it.
best way is not to get pregnant by somebody else. But
Well, that
that's
obviously, but yeah, but that I mean, the reality is though it happens, and unfortunately, in my opinion, case law is way behind the times on that. You look at that presumption of
human
paternity and
beings
all
way
that.
behind the times on that. Human beings,
Okay,
men, in my opinion, and this is not going to be politically correct, should consider, and I not that's not just for targets like athletes and celebrities, but anybody um, should consider a vasectomy, freezing their sperm, putting it in the freezer, and when and if you decide you'd like to have a child, you can go to the refrigerator, go to the freezer, or go to the doctor's office and get your frozen semen, and say, "I would like now to have my wife get pregnant with this frozen semen." That avoids this problem altogether. It's not as romantic,
wow,
but
that
you know,
that is an interesting solution you just proposed. So if I'm a hypothetically speaking 25-year-old man, get a vasectomy, have my sperm frozen, and if 5 years later we decide to have a child, go that route.
scientifically, it's available now. It's getting easier and
It
easier,
is.
more and more. You know, Probably better chance of getting pregnant. The science is getting better. The medicine's getting better. It's interesting. Although, with the latest Alabama court ruling, maybe that's a crazy idea because now there's liability if that. I'm not talking about an embryo. I'm just talking about freezing your sperm. But
Right,
who knows
right.
where the law's going to go? Is a sperm a child? Is a sperm an extra uterine human being? If we get that far, then we're really
Yeah,
in
that's
trouble.
that's it. Not to go too far into the weeds with that, but that's an interesting case that came out. When, and for those that don't know, basically the Alabama courts decided that an embryo is a child at that point. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's a little more in depth. I mean, what happened is these people had, an embryo is a child that once it's implanted, it can be brought to life, right? It's a
Hmm.
it's a semen inserted into an egg. But what happened is the hospital or the facility dropped it and it, ruined it. And so the people could sue because the court determined that that was covered as life, and so it was like the death of, so yes, the translation is exactly as you said. They're sort of opening the door to say, embryos have not yet been implanted into a uterus actually can be treated as human beings, as extrauterine human beings. To me, an extrauterine human being is me, right? Us. We are
Right.
outside the uterus and we're human.
I think you and I are in agreement. I mean, I remember reading about that case and going, "What? How did we get to this point where the poor technician or whomever dropped the thing is facing charges?" I believe
Yeah. There's a
that
lot to-
for an accident. I mean, it wasn't even deliberate, and it's scary. No offense to you as a lawyer, but you lawyers, man.
well, I'm not even sure if it's criminal or if it's a civil case if they're trying to recover damages,
I,
which
either
damages.
way, you know.
And then the other thing is, when you do this kind of stuff and you impregnate an embryo, you usually do 10 of them or four of them so that if, one works, then you're done. What do you do with the other eight or nine? If you destroy them, have you destroyed life or potential life? And so then maybe people say, I don't want to do it in the first place because I don't want to then destroy life, but I want a child. The best way to have a child is to have four or five frozen embryo. It's a conundrum.
And it's, I think, with science advancing the way it is, it's only going to be even more of a conundrum down the road. Randy, if we can, I want to. One of the things I thought might be useful to do is to have you kind of explain to the audience how a case would be handled from beginning to end. In other words, you know, I'm a dad. Let's assume it's me. I presume that I am the father, but now I'm suspecting it's not. I then come to your office. From that point forward, what would you say to me? How would we go? And then let's assume we're going to move forward through the courts. Can you just give me a quick and dirty how that all works and what
Yeah, and
I
I'm going
would
to step back.
expect?
I'm going to step back and change your presupposition because that's one way it happens.
Okay.
But it should happen with a good lawyer. When someone comes in to me and says they're going to have a child, I suggest they get a DNA test or that they insist on a DNA test before child support is awarded. So sometimes that happens. People have been living or in a divorce. People are married, they come, they want to get a divorce. And I try to say, do you want a DNA test? Most people say, no, we've been raising these kids together. I know it's my child, or even if it's not. But that's one way it happens is that, the lawyer says, are you 100% sure? And if you aren't 100% sure, do you want to do a DNA test? So it may come up that way, but let's go with your example. You get a hint, or your ex-wife's best friend has a moment of clarity and feels guilty and calls you and says, I've had this secret and I wanted to tell you that she cheated on you and that child may not be yours, or however you find out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you come to me and you say, I think this is not my child. First thing we do is the DNA test. Either you can do it privately without telling her if that's allowed by the state, or we write to her and say, before we file a lawsuit, we'd like to consider a DNA test, not because he doesn't love this child, not because he doesn't think it's his, but he's got some reason to suspect, and he just wants to be clear about it. And you can say the same thing 100 different ways. I prefer saying it in, he doesn't want to ever look back and have any doubts. He doesn't have doubts, but somebody's planted this doubt in his mind, and he wants to clear that up so he can tell this person, you were wrong. Don't ever accuse me again of not being the father, or whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
But we try it without going to court because, number one, what if they are wrong, right? What if it is your child? You want to make sure you've not poisoned the well and made the relationship irreversibly broken. Um, Assuming we get no positive response, or assuming the test gets done cooperatively and it's not your child, the first thing I've got to do is have a long, hard discussion with you. And obviously, if you come to my office, you want to do something about it. You're not willing to just let bygones be bygones. Some people just want to know, and they want to know their rights. But assuming you want to do something about it, you don't want to pay child support anymore. You don't have a good relationship with this child anymore. I'm making it easy on myself, right?
Right.
Assuming you don't want to pay child support, you're not filthy rich, so it is hurting you to pay child support. You don't have a relationship with this child either because the mother has alienated you, or you live in another state and have another family. Whatever it is, you just want off the hook. We file a lawsuit. In Georgia, it's a motion to set aside the determination of paternity or to set aside the divorce decree, which says you have three children. Um, and then we do what's called discovery. Like in any case, we start to be able to figure out the facts. We get to ask her questions under oath. Do you have sex with anybody within 6 weeks of the gestation date? 9 months, less, more or less, 11 months to 7 months before the child was born. Was there anyone else? Who was that person? Um, the first thing we ask for is for the court to order an official DNA test, because if it comes back that he's the father, case over. If it comes back he's not the father, then the next question, and we've had this, is to calculate what are we going to do about it? I've had a judge not only make the lady pay back the $25,000 in child support, but to pay me $55,000 in legal fees that he had to pay me to get off the hook. Um, at that point, he didn't want the money back. He just wanted to be done with her. And so we let it go. But there are 100 ways it can go, but it's pretty straightforward. If you are not the father, and if the law supports the judge letting you off the hook for support, you also lose your rights to be able to go to the hospital or to check in on the child because you won't be the legal father anymore. Um, there are 100 ways it can go, and it's sort of weird because in that case years ago, I knew who the real father was because it was the lady's cousin. And so we sued him to try to bring him in so I could make it easy for the judge. Remember, I told you earlier, I want to make the judge's job easier. How can I
Right.
get them to do? Well, I thought to get the judge to let my client off the hook, it would be easy if the judge had a replacement and could put the real guy on the hook so the child still got support and still had a father. Um, at that point, the guy didn't want to be involved. He didn't show up, and the judge, and we just said, fine, I'm not going to do your work for you, lady. We're going to get my client off the hook, and then you can go after him if you want. You're not cooperating with me. But that's another thing you can do. You can try to find the real person. You can try to work out a deal. Maybe they want to be involved. Maybe they go through therapy and get over the fact that they never were told they had a child, and they're happy to have a child. Um, so there are 100 ways it can go, but the first step is you hire a lawyer, reach out to the other side. Hopefully they get a good lawyer, and the lawyer calls and says, what do you want? My client wants to know for sure if he is or isn't the father. And if not, he wants to know, what does she want? And if she says, I want to be away from him, I don't want to talk to him. But the real conversation is me and you, me and the client.
Hmm.
Because filing this, bringing it to light means in all likelihood, you're not going to have a good relationship with this child, even if it turns out you are the father. So you have to be really ready to go. And a lot of people are ready to go, right? They've got a new family. They're not seeing the child anyway. At that point in time, how do I do it so that I can tell my client, you can look back on this and you did it the right way, because there still is an innocent child. So let's not blaze the earth. Let's not scorch the earth. Let's tell her whatever the reason was, it's over. He's not going to pay any more support. And truthfully, unless you can convince us that he shouldn't get back the money he paid, we're going to ask that you repay him over time for the money he paid. Problem with that is, if the money was spent on the child, is the child responsible to repay it? Of course not.
Right.
So do you make the mother, if the mother has to repay it, then the child suffers. Sometimes if the real father knew, the bio father knew that he was the bio father, but it was just staying quiet, we bring them in and say, we want to put that guy on the hook. Like the case I was just telling you about.
Right.
You knew you were the father of the child and you got away with not paying support. You should be reimbursing my client. So it can go 100
it's
different ways.
it's so convoluted, and I understand that, and I appreciate you going through it the way you did, because again, we're trying to talk in
Yeah, it's hard.
generalities, and every states are different and how they handle it, but it does give people an idea of what it's like. When
There
I
is relief. There are answers. There are ways.
mm,
If you don't ask, you don't get anywhere. And don't wait until your child's 25 and say, I wish I'd done it at 15, because that's 3 years worth of child support you could have saved. Or you could have, just like you said earlier, Dan, if if you're honest up front, you take a DNA test up front, it clears everything out. So
mm.
better at age 15 than at age 18 or age 30. I mean, just, you don't want to do it when it's too late and then you wish you'd done it earlier.
I mean, one of the issues that I've had, people that have reached out to me about it and asked me what I know, that they'll say is, well, if I go meet with an attorney, it's going to cost me money up front. Very likely it is. I mean, a
Yeah.
retainer and all that. I mean, not set aside a high profile athlete or something like that. An average Joe, like let's say myself, if I were to go to an average attorney or a very good one like yourself, I mean, how much would I realistically have to pay? Again, there's no set number and it's different in all different areas of the country. But if I had to give a retainer to an average attorney, what am I looking at?
Well, I'm going to tell you, and did I call you Don before,
No, you were
Dan?
Dan. No, you called me Dan. You were good.
All right. I just want to make sure.
All good, my friend.
So, um, it depends on the lawyer, right? And usually you get what you pay for. Sometimes you overpay
Yeah.
for bad advice. Sometimes you get good advice for, very low cost. Um, do your research. Find out who's got the good reputation. There's a reason people have reputations. I think you call the lawyer that you might know, the person who helped your sister in her car accident, the person who, lawyers know who's respected in other areas of the law, number one. But um, in small towns, lawyers are going to be no less than $200 an hour. In big towns, $500 an hour more. Um, some firms have a range. We have lawyers that go from 285 an hour up to 850 an hour. So it depends on Maybe you get the big shot lawyer to be the main lawyer, but have the younger lawyer do a lot of the work. Most law firms are going to want a retainer, and that
Hmm.
could be a $5,000 advance against work that they're going to do. And if they don't do it all or it settles, you get it back. Some may want more, but a case like this where you don't have the other side that's totally cooperative and totally easy to get along with, it's a $5,000 to $10,000 minimum investment, I think, in getting this done. A good judge will make the other side pay you back, which doesn't always happen, or if
I
the
was
other
going to say
side can't.
that's a risk, though, right? You never know for sure one way or the other.
Right.
And that's where, again, when I'm talking to guys that have dealt with this, I'm like, you've got to look at it from a financial aspect. You're going to have to lay out potentially 10,000, 20,000, maybe
Yeah.
50, who knows,
That's
right?
not, and it's not fair. I mean, it's
It's
not
not.
fair.
But then the other side of it is they'll say, well, am I going to get it back if I win? You might not. Again, it depends on the judge, the situation, and all that. But then the other side of it is, and I want to get your opinion on this, is I will say to them, because I've had guys that have spoken to me and said, well, I've been paying child support for 12 years. And, I got 6 more years and I don't want to pay another dime. And I just want it done with. And I'll say, step back. How much are you paying? And is that 6 years times what you're paying per month more than what you might pay an attorney and not get back? And sometimes it is,
That's a great
sometimes it
point.
isn't.
It's a great point. And the flip side that people might think they should do is, well, you know what? It's not my child. I'm just not going to pay. And then when she comes to sue me to put me in jail for not paying child support, I'm going to say, aha, judge, she's trying to put me in jail for not paying support for a child that wasn't mine. I've got the DNA test. It doesn't work like that.
That
It's
would be
court
a
ordered. It makes sense. It's only seems like what's fair. But if you want to stop the obligation, you've got to take some affirmative action to do it. You can't just wait and say, I'm not going to pay. And now that she paid a lawyer to put me in jail, I'm going to catch her and say, aha, I got you. You can tell her ahead of time that you're going to do that. Maybe she won't ever do it. But best, and again, we talked about 5, 10, $20,000. It doesn't cost that much to talk to a lawyer. There are lawyers that do free consultations. There are lawyers that will charge 1 hour of their time to talk to you. Do your homework, do your research, watch all of your podcasts, learn as much as you can, and then go talk to a lawyer and say, ask the same questions. What's my likelihood of success? How long is it going to take? How are the judges in this county? What's the law in this state? And talk to that lawyer like your lawyer, but also like your therapist, and try to figure out a global solution. And hopefully they answer you the way I did, if it's right for you, which is, let me reach out to her before we file a lawsuit. Let me write a nice letter, explain that you have some reason to believe that maybe it's not your child. You want to make sure that that's either wrong or right information. Can we do a test voluntarily? And if it turns out it's not your child, we like to talk to you about resolution, whatever that may mean. Just an open-ended, she'll freak out. She will either say, no, I want the money. I don't know what you're talking about. Or she'll say, I didn't have sex with anybody else. How dare you? I'll take a test tomorrow.
Mhm.
But something will happen. But you got to ask the question. You got to have the confrontation, or you're going to wrestle with it the rest of your life. And that doesn't cost you $20,000. That costs you a meeting with a lawyer and a letter. And then you see how she responds. And then you decide your next steps.
And again, there's no right or wrong to that. It's unique to you and your situation. If you're listening to this, you got to do what's best for you. It would be my argument to anyone with any of this, because it's not just the financial toll, it's the emotional, the mental toll, the physical toll potentially. And people tend to forget about that. The guys that reach out to me, they get very emotional about it, and I want to get out of it. That's not my kid. I don't want anything to do with it. And it's like, take a breath, step back. All right, here's the situation. Think it through. There's no right or wrong, and I always tell them that. I never give them an answer, but I always say to them, think it through thoroughly, because you are affecting not just yourself but the child.
Well, and you could really be, esoteric about it and philosophical and intellectually superior and say, you know what? One of the nicest things somebody can do in the world is to adopt a child that's unwanted, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you could do that, and that's giving back, and that's helping a child. What about a child that is not yours, that you were deceived by, but that benefits because they have a relationship with you, despite the fact that their mother defrauded you, despite the fact that you were cheated out of money? You had something to do with this child having a better upbringing than they would have without you. And it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard secret to keep. Maybe that's the answer. I'll be the only one that knows that I did the right thing by this child. This child is going to be told lies about me by their mother. They're going to say that I didn't want to have anything to do with this child, that I didn't pay enough money. And I can't say, child, you weren't even mine, but I still paid money. I'm just gonna have to keep it a secret, zip it, but maybe I'm doing something good for the world. I mean, there's just 100 ways to answer this dilemma. It's a individual situation. You're
Yeah.
right.
There's
Thank you.
no right or wrong with any of it. And I think you mentioned earlier it's a gray area and everybody's got to look at their individual situation.
I mean, the hard part is that the people that you're talking about and the people that are approaching you, I'm sure, because I've seen them, they come in, they're angry, right? They have a
Oh,
right to be angry.
absolutely. Absolutely
You
they
don't
do.
need me sitting in my high-rise office saying, maybe you're going to help this nice child that didn't have anything to do with it. Well, but she cheated me out of my money and she cheated me out of this relationship and I've suffered. Now I've got to start. That's a lot of anger and it's all legitimate and it's right and it's appropriate. The question is, how are you going to feel about it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you're older? How would you like your younger self to have handled it? And it's hard. I mean, it's hard. We're all
Yeah, you
humans.
don't want to live life with regrets. That's one of the things I've lived my entire life by is I don't want to every decision I've made, and I've made mistakes, don't get me wrong, but at least I knew that I was doing it for the right reasons, even when I screwed up on things. And when you can sit back and say that to yourself, like the scenario you talked about, I took care of a child that wasn't mine. I can feel good about that, even though I'm angry at the same time. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with that. You brought up something that I want to kind of touch on it, which is the legalities of it all, right? So I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you because it's something I hear about from guys all the time. Is it illegal? Is paternity fraud actually illegal? Why aren't they putting the mom in jail? That's the way that'll phrase
So, so I don't think it's been criminalized. That's the issue. Has the
it.
legislature passed a law that says it is criminal to not tell a father that he's not the father? And I think it's a very hard law to pass because number one, you'd have to prove intent. And a lot of women that have sex with two or three guys don't intend to. They pick the guy that they think is the father. That was most likely the right timing or whatever. So how do you prove that they knew he wasn't the father? If they took the DNA test and didn't tell the father, um, I think it's. I don't think I can't. I don't know of a state where it is a criminal act where someone can go to jail for, but maybe it should be. Maybe that's what we need to motivate people to do the right thing. I don't know, but I don't know of any states that have that passed as a criminal uh, violation.
The only one that I'm aware of, Randy, that and I'm not even sure exactly how it plays out is Tennessee passed one recently where they were talking about if it's an actual, you've defrauded someone, then potentially it could be referred. But the research that I've done, I don't believe there's a single state.
Or you could be creative. You could say it's theft by taking. It's sort of like I sold you a Pontiac. God, am I old? I sold you I
Yeah, but
sold you, a Tesla for $10,000, and you find out later that it wasn't a Tesla. It was really a Mesla. It was an imitation. That's a fraud. Maybe that's a crime because I stole your $10,000. So maybe you could have some theory of theft that it was stealing money under false pretenses. So maybe there are some criminal laws that are being broken.
yeah, I think in the Tennessee case, and forgive me, I don't know these exact thing, but I believe they made it like a misdemeanor of some sort. So it's not like mom's not going to jail. All right, if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to put her in jail, it's never going to happen. They're not going to take a child's mother and throw her in jail. In that, at least I don't think. Maybe would you concur with that, or
Yeah, it's hard. Like they don't put moms in jail for not giving visitation
right?
often.
So how is it any different? But I can also understand why there should be some penalty, and there's always civil, as you've talked about before. But are you going to collect? Are you going to go through all that trouble? Is there any money available? Like when I did the video about the judge who was 70 years old, they're like, well, he should sue her for every penny. And I'm like, first of all, he's not going to get every penny. Let's set that aside. Second of all,
She's 70 years old.
she's 70 years old. She's probably on retirement, Social Security. Let's say he wins $100,000. Where are they going to get it from? It's I think what happens is we kind of touched on it is when the anger overrules everything else. You got to take that step back and look at this from a realistic perspective.
And here's maybe the way to look at it. I'm not a psychologist, but is she really the reason that your life is not so good? I mean, you've done okay despite her, but fixing this or addressing this is not going to change your life. You're not going to all of a sudden be rich or better at something. It might be justice. It might should happen, but you know, what is really going on? What do you want to do? Do you want to be able to afford to have another child? Well, then it's a financial situation. Deal with it financially. Is it you want to make sure that this child knows who their real father is because they have a right to know who their real father is? It's just, what is your goal? Everyone's goals are different. And I would think a lot of guys, I know a lot of guys, it's just, she stole this money and I want her to pay it back.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, like you said, number one, can you afford a lawyer to go after her? Number two, if not, can you try to figure it out yourself? Number three, if you win in court, is she going to pay it? If she doesn't pay it, are you going to be that much angrier that you spent all this time and maybe money on a lawyer and still didn't get it? It's sort of the lesser of all evils is the way what we have to think about what's going to be accomplished. And sometimes a lot of guys just let it go because that's just the lesser of all evils.
If it allows you to step away and walk away and still hold your head held high, that might be the best approach for a lot of guys. And I understand that, right? Others will say, well, you should fight tooth and nail to the bitter end. And I'm like, you haven't been through it. I've never been through it. It's not something I experienced. I would never tell anyone fight tooth and nail because I can't put myself in that position. If it were me, I would step back and look at the situation, how long ago it was. And that brings up a question I haven't asked yet. Statutes of limitations, do they apply at all in these cases?
Not really. It's sort of like as soon as you find out that you are the father or not the father, then you have some certain time limits depending on your state. Um, there is a book that can I share my screen? You think is it
You might be able to. I might
okay,
have to give you permission. Hang on, let me.
yeah, let's see if you can give me permission. Yeah, you disabled it, but
Hang on, I'm doing it now because that would be great if we can do that.
there are multiple participants. There you go.
There you go. You
Okay.
should be able to now.
All right. So I'm going to show you this. Trapped by Law. That's a book written by Carnell Smith, and I'm not getting a cut or a referral fee. This is his book and his story. And if you read it, trapped by law sounds like an oxymoron because law should not exist to trap us. He knows exactly what it means to be trapped by law. For years, he had to battle the courts, judges, attorneys, and an ex-girlfriend, all in the name of paternity fraud. So, if you want to feel better about it and read what somebody else has gone through, he does a really good job. And I'm glad I thought about this before we finished our conversation because I'll stop the share and
Yep.
go to your pretty face instead of that book. Trapped by Law, it may be a nice resource for those who want to know, at least one man's story and how he got through, and he gives some good tips in there. Um, so,
I've actually read it, so
oh,
I
look
will
at that.
put a
Look at
link
that.
down in the description because I highly recommend you go read it.
Yeah.
I've never met Carnell. I would love to get him on the podcast if you can help me out.
You
Um,
shoot me a text and I'll connect you. I'm sure he'd be glad to. This is
I
something
I do know someone that actually I don't know if they met him at a seminar or something like that, but I guess they had a conversation and said he's an amazing man. But
wonderful guy.
uh,
Wonderful guy.
yeah, I do remember seeing. Was it Good Morning America or something like that. You might have
Yeah,
been on with him. You mentioned earlier.
yeah, I wasn't on Good Morning America. I remember they called me to set it up. And they said, all right, we're all going to meet at your office. And then they called me that afternoon and said, okay, what time are you coming down? They said, oh, we stopped by his house. We filmed him. We're good. And I wasn't mad that I wasn't on Good Morning America. I was mad that they asked him questions without his lawyer there to make sure he didn't get asked anything that was improper. So,
Yeah, never go in public without your lawyer if you got an active case.
I
That's
could have
for
been behind
sure.
the camera, but at least but he knew what he was doing. He was a good guy.
It's funny because again, that was many years ago, but that at the time I was doing a radio show and that became a topic that week because it was seen on the morning shows. And it's funny because uh, not to again, it was just weird. I was doing the show. I was on with morning shock jocks, right? So I would go on periodically and their board would light up when I was on. And I'm
Yeah,
not
all
even a lawyer, right? I'm just
sport questions. These
oh my
questions.
God.
I used to
That
do some shows
board
like
bro
Russ Parr and Ricky Smiley. I'd be on their shows, and yeah, the phone boards would light up.
I
Everybody
mean,
has
it literally broke the board. There were so many guys calling, well, I'm a victim and I'm a victim. And I'm like, I was actually like way out of my element because I'm not a lawyer. I'm like, I can't tell you what to do,
but it
and
was
all that.
helpful. I'm sure some relief that
But
okay, they're not alone.
yeah, it kind of, that's where I really started seeing just how prevalent it is. Again, I don't want to overblow it either, but I think it's a lot more prevalent than most people realize.
It's
Um,
it's not big enough for the nation to take note and make the presidential election be about paternity fraud. It's just not that big of a deal to that many people that Congress is going to pay attention to it. But if it affects you, it affects you.
Yeah, and if it does, my argument would be it's a state level. You need to go meet with your state legislators, talk to your local, in my case, North Carolina, it would be your House and Senate side. I'm sure Georgia's probably the same. That's who you need to be speaking to see if it can be addressed. Randy, just a couple more things and then we'll wrap things up. From your experience, having been through all this, and I know you also handle high profile cases, but in terms of the father, the child, and all that, what advice would you give to someone just in general about all of this? You know, should they pursue it legally? What? Obviously, the answer would be
I
yes.
think
But
knowledge is power. I mean, I
okay,
think it's sort of like you feel, you know, do a test at birth. Ask the questions, deal with it. And again, I keep saying talk to a lawyer, and I'm not trying to make people pay money for lawyers, but go have a conversation with someone who's been through it. Most lawyers, especially successful lawyers that don't need more business, are going to sort of talk you through it and talk about, listen, your situation is bad, but if you go to court, it's going to be worse. Or here's what you just talk about it. That's probably very therapeutic and cathartic for people to address it, not to have to wait until they see your podcast and say, oh, I've been waiting to ask somebody. Find out, go search it out. But you know, advice is very hard to give on a general, broad level. Um, I think, especially if you don't have a friend that really understands this, that, has their own podcast about this, like you do, then find somebody or talk to a lawyer or a therapist and figure out what's going to make you happy in the end. Is it filing a lawsuit? Is it doing the right thing and just walking away? Is it saying, you know what? I know it's not my child, but I'm going to pay you, and you can just live with that in your conscience, and you can, think about it on your deathbed and how you handled your life and how I handled mine. Just think about these things. And this is not why your life is bad. If you think your life is bad because of this, it might have contributed to it, but you know, it may be an unfixable problem. You may have, uh, you may limp because you've got something wrong with your leg. If you can't fix it, you live with it and you figure out how to survive and succeed and do what you can with this impediment that you have. This is an impediment and it's a problem, but they come in all shapes and sizes, right? They're mental impediments, there's physical impediments, there's legal impediments. This is a problem. The question is the fix worse than the problem? And that's what I think you ultimately have to figure out. Is fixing it, worth the effort and energy, or is it easier to live with it and overcome it? And yeah, it's not fair. And sometimes all people need to hear is somebody that understands it's not fair. And it is not fair.
it
It
is
is not
not.
fair.
No. All right, final question. And this one might be a toughie or might not. I don't know. But in terms of looking forward, where do you see the law? Where do you see potentially judges and how they rule and all that? Where do you see this going? Because I do think it's becoming a more known issue. There is more talk than I've ever seen, but what do you see happening in, say, the next 10 years or so?
It's getting better, right? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. People are hearing about it. You have more and more women on the bench who are honest, hardworking judges that are busting their butt. And if they see a woman that's getting a free ride from a guy that didn't pay for a child, that didn't have a child but is paying for it, there's more exposure. Judges are more familiar with it. The first time you walk into court and say, "Judge, I've got a case of paternity fraud," and they say, "What?" You're in trouble. When you walk in nowadays and say, "Judge, I've got a case of paternity fraud," they say, "Oh, so someone lied about whose child it was." Right. So I think it's getting better. Judges understand it. And I think in those cases, like a lot of cases, judges are very inclined to look everybody in the eye and say, if we go to court and I find out that somebody lied about who the father was and deceived the father at the most glorious time of their life, that they were having a child and didn't tell him that he was not the father, and you've been collecting money from him and misleading that child, I'm going to be very upset and I'm going to make sure that I fix it. So I'll give you guys a chance to go try to work it out privately. But if you can't work it out, I'll be right here ready to have a hearing. So I think that's going to happen more and more. Judges like to encourage settlement. And this is one where a judge can really take the moral high ground and say, you don't want me to be judging what you did, because I've got a lot to say about it. So see if y'all can figure it out. And at that point, it might get worked out. Sometimes all the guy needs is an apology. I mean, that's a lot of guys just want her to say, you are a good guy and I took advantage and I'm sorry. And I hope God forgives me, or I hope that, I can make it up to you.
Mm.
That might be enough for some people. But I think the future is bright. I think that, again, shows like yours that are talking about it, books like Carnell's that talk about it, lawyers taking them to court so that judges hear about it. Um, Word's getting out. And I'd much rather be a guy that suffered paternity fraud against him now than 25 years ago when it was Carnell Smith and nobody even thought this was a thing and didn't think that, it ever happened. Now people have heard about it and people are hearing about it. So I think the future is bright. I think judges are more open to trying to fix it. I'd rather be a victim of this today than 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, especially when there was no DNA testing available. It was hard.
Yeah. And just to add from the legislative perspective, I think politicians are becoming more aware of it also. And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll see some laws. I mean, Tennessee started putting some stuff into place. You just don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a politician. Are they going to offend women? Are women going to be upset that they're making women do this when it's not really a sexist thing? But, I don't know how politics works. So, but if that doesn't work in the legislature, you'll find a judge that's sympathetic sooner or later.
Well, my hope is the solution to me for all of this, not that it'll make it entirely go away, but mandatory DNA testing at birth would be something to at least be considered.
And the best argument is not that it's the moral, right, correct thing to do, which I think it is. The best argument is probably for medical reasons.
Yes.
That child needs to know what his DNA is or her DNA is so that if they have an issue, they can know, is that something that is historically in that child's bloodline, that child's family. That's a good enough scientific argument. Forget your morals, right? You should know that's what, for adoption, you got to have that record for who the biological parent was.
And that's the argument I've made as well. Randy, any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, get the word out. It's great to have folks, advocating. And, when you advocate, not you, but when people advocate and they're upset about it, just remember, people help victims. They don't help angry people. So if you're angry about it and you yelp, run up and down and jump up and down and pound on the table, nobody's going to listen. You got a story. It's a very good story and you are a victim, but you got to make sure that everyone understands that you're not looking to crucify the world and go after everybody. You just want to make sure that you're helping change the world for the better and for this child's life, for your life, and for the next person that comes along in this position, and empower the judge to say, Judge, you can help this family and you can help future families by sending a message that this is not behavior that we accept in this society. And I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that we don't tolerate people lying about stuff like this. And you present it calmly, you get a lot farther than if you present it angrily, but you have every right to be angry.
Randy, thank you so much for taking a little over an hour out of your busy day. I know you're a very busy man. I cannot thank you enough, and I truly appreciate you coming on and helping to educate everyone, men, women.
Oh, you're doing good work. Look, the side gig, good lawyers should be able to share what they know, and I've learned a lot of stuff by my years of doing it. So if it helps one person a little bit, it's been worth every minute.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to help more than one. And if I get feedback, and I will, I'll let you know.
Good or bad, you let me know.
I will absolutely let you know. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close things down. Folks, thanks for watching. And thank you again for Randy for coming on. It's a tough subject to talk about. It really is, but it's one that needs to be talked about. We do need to raise awareness that it is an issue. And ultimately, my belief is, and Randy I know is the same, the one person we don't want to hurt is the child. And if raising awareness helps protect children, that's why I do what I do. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, give me that thumbs up, give me that like, and be sure to subscribe to the channel because I have a lot of other things that we're going to be covering. And it helps me by having you subscribe. It helps me to get experts like Randy on to talk about the various issues that men and boys face. On that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks again for watching. Men need to be heard.